Now I'm going to start looking at the tools, and on the left here you will see you've got a left hand vertical toolbar, and this is where all your digitizing tools reside. You'll notice over on the right hand side you've got a color chart. They are Windows colors, they are not thread colors. You can go in and you can ask for define color and change some of them if you wish, but they are Windows colors, not thread colors. Below it we've got an empty menu bar, but it's only empty because we haven't chosen a tool, because this is where parameters would show, or we haven't created an object, because once we create an object it sits here in this right hand menu, and then we're able to access it to change its color, its density, its stitch type, whatever. On the top of this left hand vertical toolbar we have got our selection tool. Then we've got our nodes adjust icon, and you use that when you want to do a little bit of editing or shuffling around nodes which you're not quite happy with. Then we've got our magnifying tool. I did sit down once and work out exactly what the magnification was. I wrote it all down and then mislaid the notebook, but it works quite simply. You left click to enlarge. Each left click makes the screen more magnified, and I work with a grid that's 2 mm by 2 mm by 2 mm, a subgrid that's 1 mm by 1 mm. Okay, now to take this back down in magnification, I right click on the screen with my magnifying tool selected, and that takes the screen back down again. And you'll notice as I went down, so my subdivisions of 1 mm disappeared. This is, go back to the power of 1, and there it is. This is my panning tool, and I can move my screen around where it's possible. There you go, and it moves it up. I don't use that very much either, so I drop that off. Now I come to the first of the digitizing tools, and this is our fill tool. And if you get to look at it closely, you'll see it's the shape of a hammerhead with no break and a grey fill. So we're going to start off with the fill tool. Now that I've selected the tool, over on my right I've got the tool parameters, and it's here that I can set the parameters for this tool, either for just this one object or for every object that I intend doing using that tool in this design. I'm going to move my screen up to the center. Now I'm going to place a single node on my screen right in the center. Coming from that single node, I've got 4 points of the compass: north, east, south and west. I call it my Sputnik node. Coming out on the eastern side of it, it's got a long tail and it looks like an arrow. That's my fill angle, and if we look into the parameters box on the right, you'll see the fill is at a 0. Now you watch that red hand inside that clock face. Well, I press my P key and I move my mouse, but I don't depress my mouse button. I move my mouse around that node, and the hand on that fill angle face moves with it. So you can set your angle using your P key on your keyboard, holding it down and just moving your cursor. Don't depress your cursor key. So let's leave it there at 30. I will take a slightly deeper look now at this. You can see this figure at the top is greyed out. That's because it belongs to a specific tool, and so is this one. And at the moment we don't have that tool selected, so they are not live. They're greyed out. Below it we've got a a lot of little boxes. Some people like to use these, other people ignore them. I ignore them, I never use them. This first one is middle point first. I find it too confusing. Snap to where work area edges. Oh no. Snap to guidelines. Maybe if I really want a line to follow a guideline faithfully. Snap to nodes. Yes, I do use that, but not up here. I use it in my edit menu. Snap to grid. I don't use that. And snap to object edges. I don't use that. You can try all of these. I tried them and found that they didn't suit my style of digitizing, but they may very well suit yours. So don't take my word for it when I say I don't use these and you think, oh, I mustn't use those either. You have to find out if snapping to grid, node, alignment line is suitable for you, or using middle nose first. Below it, you've got a little box with a curve or a straight line in it. This one pops the curve node in. This one leaves the curve node out, so you only get straight lines. I don't want straight lines. I want to be able to create some curves. That's your tool. Pull compensation. Well, I'll look at that in a moment. I want my pull compensation at 0.3. That's 0.3 of a millimeter, and it will extend 0.3 of a millimeter beyond my trace line in the direction of my fill angle. Density. We'll also be looking at how you can identify what the density is that you've been using. So I click on the word density and I set mine for 4.3, I think. My machine actually likes 4.5, but each machine is different. There are no hard and fast rules as to how dense your fills should be. The only rule is try not to go below density 4, which is the default, unless you're using a 60 weight thread. This density is for a 40 weight thread. If you were using a 30 weight thread, you'd go up a full notch, so you'd be looking at 0.5. Then we have auto column, but we won't look at auto column just yet. Then we have motif, and we're not going to look at that just yet, but we will be looking at it. Then we have gradient, and we'll look at this as well. Make cover stitches. Now it is possible for you to say no to the cover stitches and only stitch the underlay. And you might think, well, what's the point of that? Well, there are occasions when it is handy just to stitch the underlay. Plain fill, and that's weave fill number 1. Then we've got our different types of underlay. Edge run, zigzag 1, that's layer 1, zigzag 2. We slide the slider over. Scale 100%. When you're using a tool like the fill tool, 100% is the default length of each stitch. You can elongate it by going 100 and something. You can decrease it by saying only give me 90. We've got effect, and we will be looking at effects, but not just yet. And then you've got random shift, and that you use for motifs, and that's about it, to be truthful. Use jumps if loose rows, that's fine. Maximum random broadening, 1 and 2, that's feathering. Side 1 is always the side with the Sputnik node. Okay, now this is our underlay width, and I don't like my underlay widths being 5 millimeters. Actually, I preferred it 2.8. I found that gives the most consistent results. Doesn't stretch the fabric, doesn't pull the fabric. Don't ask me why. I honestly do not know. So that's all I'm doing in there for a minute. Now I'm going to take you up to shape. And I'm going to ask for, well, we'll take an 8 element ellipse. Now ellipse can be anything from an oval to a circle. If you want a circle that's completely round, hold down your control key and pull a round circle. After you've released your left mouse button, release the control key. Right click to Elements, and immediately that node that I put onto the screen jumps into the ring. Now I tell it Finish Object. Now even though I've told it Finish Object, there is nothing in that yet. It's empty. I haven't assigned any stitches to it. So I right click, I go to Parameters, I say to Parameters, because this time it's given me an extra little command, and I tell it hold parameters for new objects, and I tell it generate stitches, and there are my stitches, absolutely loaded with horrible nasty little whippies. So I right click into it, I go to Edit, and I tell it place fill endpoint here. Then I come over to this side and I tell this one, by right clicking into it, fill start point here. Generate stitches. I've still got whippy lines, but they are nowhere near as bad. And I dare say if I was to go in, I could move those as well. So we'll tell it Edit. I'm going to put place direction node here. Generate stitches. Still a bit messy. Okay, now what can I do with that shape? Well, let's go to Edit. Now I'd asked for an 8 element shape. I started out with a single node. Now I can pull that in, bring this one with it, I'll just bring that one down a bit, and I can move my outside nodes, and now suddenly I've got a totally different shape just by moving a few nodes. Generate stitches. There we go. And there's that circular node that just by moving the square nodes and leaving the circular nodes on the outside rim, I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 armed starfish. Can I do anything else with it? Well, let's take a look. Edit. I can shrink that one up. Well, apart from shrinking and stretching, and maybe moving some of these back out again, not all of them, generate. Now I've got a different design again. So you can see, using your fill tool and shape, you can make yourself a host of different little shapes, and you can save these. If there's one particular one that you're very fond of and you think has turned out well, save it as a shape. You need to save it in the library, and I don't mean Miss Scarlet with the candlestick. I'm talking about your shape that you create. And if you don't particularly like a fill stitch, you go back into parameters and you say, give me that as auto column. Auto select column underlay, that's fine. Density 4.3 or 5. Thank you. And you can use a pattern for it. Fill. Let's go for scales. Generate. Well, it didn't handle that too well, did it? Can you see? So it obviously thought that this wasn't a suitable fill for that shape. But you only find these things out when you play. So let's change our mind about that one and try pavement. And we'll just try apply for a minute, getting the same thing again. Bricks, apply. Well, that looks like a basket weave. I'm going to tell that generate and then edit to find out why it's giving me that weird no, delete. Okay, let's put a fill exit point. We'll put a fill start point here, start point, end point. Generate. A kind of misshapen boomerang. That also illustrates how you use your start and your end points to control little problems. So together with your tool, with your stitch parameters, with your choice, you can end up making hundreds of different effects. And in embird you have the power to make your own fill stitches. You've got a fill editor. Okay, now in the next video we'll look at some of the other options open to the fill tool and a few more of the parameters that you can play with.